Hello, beautiful people. So today what we're going to do is do a little review of The Wealth Mindset by Neville Goddard. You probably know of Neville. He's very well known if you're into manifestation or anything like that. He has a lot of these small texts that he actually will quote scripture, which is pretty cool, and bring it in as a point of reference because at the end of the day, if you're into manifestation, you know that it's all pretty much the same. So whether you're praying, manifesting, whether you believe you can do something right, all of that is essentially enacting your will of God. And we'll get a little into what that means here in a little bit. But section 1 is fundamental, so we'll be going through that. Changing the feeling of I. So then that we're going to tap into a little bit of scripture for that one. And then what sound investments mean. The fundamentals are self-observation, definition of aim, and detachment. So these three things are necessary. One section I had put out here is this discovery can be made only through an uncritical observation of his reactions to life. So, you know, in life, we have a way of criticizing ourselves and our different reactions and different ways of being. And that prevents us from taking any action. That's kind of what this is getting into. So one section here that I thought was impactful, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it. It says, not realizing that he surrounds himself with the true image of himself, and that what he is, that only he can see. He's shocked when he discovers that it's always been his own deceitfulness that has made him suspicious of others. So this is the concept of everyone is you pushed out. So there's a little bit of psychology you can use as well. So if you know anything about shadow work, Carl Jung was really the pioneer in shadow work. Shadow work is where you essentially are trying to incorporate your shadow. We all have these shadow selves, and typically the easiest way to figure out what your shadow is by understanding what triggers you the most in others, what irks you. Like for me, for instance, I would say when people don't keep their word, when they don't have integrity, that really bothers me. I would say another thing would be when people are disrespectful, you know, when they talk over people, when they don't give people space. And these things of our shadow, right, they irk us so much in others because they're not things that we can accept within ourselves. You can definitely explore different topics with that, but that's essentially what it is, you know. Anything that really bothers you in another is really just a mirror to yourself, because typically you wouldn't have problems with these things, right? Unless you are disowning it, right? It's just something to think about. The next paragraph here is self-observation would reveal this deceitfulness one in all of us, and this must be accepted before there can be any transformation of ourselves. At this moment, try to notice your inner state. To what thoughts are you consenting? With what feelings are you identified? You must be ever careful of where you are within yourself. Most of us think that we're kind and loving, generous and tolerant, forgiving and noble, but an uncritical observation of our reactions to life will reveal a self that is not at all kind, loving, generous, tolerant, forgiving, and noble. Again, this is to go back to the shadow self. You know, I think the more you can work with your shadow, the more it won't bother you when other people display these qualities. I think the more you can get to a neutral place, you know, there's no good, there's no bad, there just is, will allow you to not be as reactive in your life, for one, but also, too, when we react to people, even if we believe it's them that's making us act this way, we're giving away our power because we've pretty much determined whenever someone is going to be like this. So like those triggers I had mentioned, if I hold on to those, right, and keep those locked away, those can't be part of me, right? Those aren't things I like. But what I'm essentially saying to my essence, to my consciousness, is that, hello, Goose. That's my dog. You want to come up and say hi? She's a sweetie. Hello. Yes, but essentially, these go on to be real. No, it's gonna stay here because we are real. Haha. But essentially, what it's saying is those things. Excuse me. It's essentially saying those things, right, have power over us because we don't want to associate with those qualities. So in the very event of saying it's bad, it's not something we want, we're pushing it away, but we're also given a power. So it's just one thing to consider. Another thing here says, anytime an entirely new set of reactions enters into a person's life, a change of consciousness has taken place. A spiritual rebirth has occurred. So essentially, you want to change your world, change how you react to your world. That is, you must define the one you would like to be instead of the one you truly are in secret. That state of consciousness that we've already described as the sum total of one's reactions to life. So essentially who you are is just a summation of who you've been, which makes complete sense. The purpose of practicing detachment is to separate us from the present reactions in our life and attach us to our aim in life. So this goes back to being unbothered and not reacting. So if you can find that peace within yourself and determine who you want to be, right? And focus on that versus reacting, you're going to have a better time getting to that place. Part 2. So this one is changing the feeling of I. So I is used throughout scripture a lot. There's different ways, but essentially, God in scripture always talks in present tense and now. So I am this, I am that. And that's essentially how you can invoke the power of God within you and the will of God by determining who you are. So for instance, if you get caught up in thinking, I am unworthy, I am unlovable, I am this or I am that, right? You are enacting the will of God into whatever you believe you are. So essentially this chapter in high level is highlighting that power and showing you that if you want a different reality, you need to be mindful of how you think you are. Because how you think you are determines who you are. Essentially. That's essentially what it says. So, here. You start changing the self after by uncritical observation you make the discovery of it. For the acceptance of self is the essence of moral problem of the world. It's the epitome of a true outlook on life. For it's the sole cause of everything you observe. Your description of the world is a confession of the self you don't know. You describe another, you describe society, you describe anything. And your description of the thing you observe reveals to one who knows this law of the being you really are. So this again is just more iteration of your world as you pushed out. So the good, the bad. The good you see in others is the good in you. The bad you see in others is the bad in you. It all comes back to the self. So you must first accept the self. When that self is accepted, then you can start to change. It's so much easier to take the virtues of the gospel and apply them to the word of life. To love the enemy, to bless those who curse us, and to feed the hungry. But when man discovers the being to be fed, the being to be clothed, the being to be sheltered, the greatest enemy of all is himself. And then he is ashamed, completely ashamed. That's the being. So we'll skip through here just a little bit. There's no power outside of the mind of man to do anything to man, and he is the arrangement of his own mind. By consenting to these restrictions in his cradle and being conditioned slowly through his youth, waking into manhood, believing himself set upon, would have to be set upon. So essentially, it's just reiterating, nothing can happen to you that you do not give consent to. No person, no thing can offend you, no thing can make you happy, right? Nothing can modify your internal world unless you gave it permission to and accepted it into your awareness. That's why, two people can go through the same, let's say like the same childhood, right? The same upbringing, but they come out completely different. It's all subjective, right? To that individual, to that ego that's forming, right? So ego is just essentially our personality. So that is what it is. But if you go further back, right, you peel more of those layers back, you get to this essence of your being. And that is what the I is. That is where everything is conjured up. That's where you can determine, I am this, I am that. That's why people can completely change their lives. That's why manifestation is so real, and everyone, more people are getting excited about it, but it's like it's been in front of us all along, right? It's always been there. How you view and determine yourself to be, you will. Like reality has to give way. So this means simply, if you have a life right now that you don't like in certain areas, don't focus on that. Make your definite chief aim that life you desire. Imagine yourself in that life. How would you feel? What would it feel like to be the person that you want to be? What would that person wear? What would that person look like? What would that person eat? What would that person do with their time? What kind of people would this person associate with? What kind of dreams would this person have? How would this person feel when they wake up? How would this person move about the world? Would they be generous? Would they be stingy? Would they be giving? Would they be loving? If you can think not of that reality, but from that reality, that is where the magic happens. Because then you are essentially, and this is just logic, if you are essentially method acting your way into becoming someone, you are them. You are them. Like maybe you have these like big goals, maybe you want a supercar, maybe you want a mansion, right? Those things, like that's just external reality that will give you a feeling, right? I did a video about this where I was, I think everything is just boiled down to two things. Everything external that we do in this life is for two reasons. One, it's to have a feeling that we're currently having not be there anymore, or two, to have an internal experience that we're not currently having. That's it. And if that is true, then we are always crafting and shaping our world. Another section here I thought was impactful is, for if a man is ever hindered, it can be only the state of consciousness in which he abides that hinders him. Man is freed or constrained by the state of mind in which he persists. If you wish to persist in your current state, well then persist in it. But I warn you, no one cares. And that's an awful blow when a man discovers that no one but himself, really cares. We find ourselves weeping with ourselves in the hope of getting others to weep with us. And what an awful shock when the day arrives that we discover that no one really ever cared. They'll give us some little listening ear for a moment, or just as they were passing us by, but they don't really care. When we make that discovery, we shake ourselves out of it and boldly appropriate the gift our Father gave us before the world was. Sounds harsh, doesn't it? No one cares. I think if you go through enough tragedy and trauma, you get to experience this, and I hope everyone watching that there was a different way that it could come to you. I think suffering has a purpose. I think when we linger in it, that's where we're missing the point of suffering. So as it says in scripture, it says, "Thy will must be done. Thy kingdom must be restored." If you'll see all things are now, you don't become. You simply select the state that you would occupy. Occupying it means you become it now. It's already a fact. Every aspect of the state in the most minute detail. It's working out and taking place. You, by occupying that state, still seem to have to go through the action of unfolding that state. But the state is really now, already completed, finished, and taking place. So right now you can choose to be the being you want to be. The double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Let not such a man believe that he will receive anything of the Lord, for he is like a wave that is driven and tossed by the wind. And essentially the last part here is just about how you invest. We're either spending or we're investing, and it's where we put our time and our effort is where we put our life. So you're either still giving life to a life that you don't want to be alive anymore, kind of a tongue twister, or you're giving life to your new life that is emerging. It is always going to be your choice.